Hi, I've made this video as a guide to all my other videos, which you'll find online, and in those videos I cover a variety of subjects and issues, and even one of my videos examines some strange objects I discovered on Mars. And anybody who's looked at my videos will realise that I have a very broad range of interests and concerns. And so I suppose I'm making this video in order to present myself in terms of, why I do what I do and what is my ambition and my objective, I suppose, which mostly it is to protect children. That's my main concern. And also because I do feel that humanity as a species has reached a pivotal point in our history, and it's one where I think, the road ahead looks bleak for the majority of people on Earth in terms of the agendas and influences that are driving the world leaders of today, which also include private individuals as well as government leaders. And I think collectively the evidence that my videos, and obviously other people's and the evidence out in the world, proves that a lot of government officials and authorities in every nation today are actually controlled more by private interests than they are by the democratic interests that those same governments and authorities are actually meant to represent. And there are some serious developments happening, as exposed in my most recent video, which shares Veterans Today's evidence and valid legal concerns, as well as compassionate and ethical concerns. And I make my videos because I hope that people will, instead of slogging straight ahead, that we do actually instead turn a corner. And that's what I'm asking people to do, I suppose, with all my videos, is I'm asking people to turn a corner and to bend with the light, I suppose, because there is something good awaiting for us around that corner. And while a lot of people may not yet be able to see it, as somebody who has personally turned that corner, and with the support of many, many other people who have also personally turned that corner, we can give assurances that the future around the corner is bright, as opposed to the gloom and doom future as proposed by the broad way ahead, and it is a broad road, isn't it, ahead. And yes, it is difficult to turn a corner. You are in a way moving into the unknown, but as I say, it isn't really an unknown, because there are living human beings and human beings from our history who have themselves personally turned that corner and found a very beautiful place. And the beautiful place that we have found is a place of life where life lives under the beneficence of universal law of abundance and compassion. And it is for that same purpose that I personally support Ubuntu Party UK, which itself is directly related to Ubuntu South Africa as established by Michael Tellinger, who himself now is forced also to be a political party, even though, the present mainstream political systems in most nations don't really support the Ubuntu and the philosophy, in terms of that most of them are committed to the present powers governing our finances, and most particularly the influences that we're all subjected to via the World Bank and the supposed debts that every nation is claimed to owe to the World Bank. And so obviously the reason why I turned that corner is significant, because there has to be some kind of valid reason that somebody would turn this corner. So, it's basically to establish the difference between somebody who makes a decision based on fantasy or just an idea or a belief, and a person who makes a decision based on evidence, life experience, knowledge, facts, understanding, which all together result in faith, you see. Because faith is something, it has to be based on something real. We can't have faith in something that has no valid foundation in our human experience. And I think that there's confusion between belief and faith as a sort of religious concern, that we have faith in God. And so, as an intelligent species, you see, we're not allowed to live just on what we believe. Our belief needs to be supported by what we actually know, and what we feel, and what we've experienced. And those are the foundations of the law. The law is founded on what we know, and what we suspect, and or what we believe, according to what we actually know. And it's that principle that means, I can't just go to the police and say, that man over there's a thief, if I've got no evidence to prove that that person's a thief, to support my suspicion that that person's a thief, or even to prove that they've actually stolen anything, you see. So, just because I believe something, it doesn't mean that it is true, and that other people should think that it's true or have faith in it. If I have evidence to support my belief, then other people can look at that evidence and they can judge for themselves. Is my belief, my suspicion, is it grounded in knowledge, in fact, or is it just my own imagination? Is there some sort of malicious intent behind it, you see? And so, I propose to the people who watch my videos that there is nothing actually malicious behind my intent, and my concerns are supported by actual facts and knowledge and lived experience and the lived historical experience of other people, on which our very church itself is founded, you see. And since that church itself has the authority to crown the Queen of England, then the experiences that support my understanding, and what I propose are equally valid, because, you know, all of my learning and understanding that I've arrived at today, and perhaps even the fact that I am alive today, is because I had an experience at age 29, just before my 30th birthday, and I witnessed a light being. And I've described that light being in other videos. I've described the experience, and well, I'll describe it here again to you now, which was basically, I woke up one morning, and it was 2 weeks after I'd had an epiphany about life and the universe and our everlasting soul. I woke up one morning to find that my body was just full of this energy that seemed to be rushing through me in a circle, and I can only describe it as bliss. It was overwhelming, and I couldn't shake it off. It was very beautiful, but I didn't understand where it was coming from or why it was happening to me. And I decided to try and take my mind off it and do a spot of ironing. And when I tried to put the plug into the socket, a big blue flash came out of the socket, and so I decided that perhaps ironing wasn't on. And I remember going into the kitchen, putting on some rubber gloves before I switched on the music centre, and I played some music for an hour or so, and still the energy was just rushing through me. And so I went upstairs to lie down for an hour on the bed, thinking perhaps, it might just pass, but it didn't. It seemed, if anything, it seemed to get stronger. So I decided that I might as well be experiencing this bliss outdoors in the beautiful sunshine, because it was a beautiful spring day in April 26th of April 1992. And as I got up off the bed, I glanced out of the bedroom window, and I saw my son's friend and his mother sitting on the doorstep opposite our house. And to my left, I saw a one single white fluffy cloud in an otherwise clear blue sky, and that cloud was hanging quite low above the old bakery. And as I looked at the cloud, I noticed that the sun was shining from behind the cloud. And then I went to the bedroom door to go downstairs, and it was at that point that I stopped, because I realised that at midday the sun shines from behind our house, and that's why my son's friend and his mother were sat in full sunshine on their doorstep. So I returned to the window to have a look at the glowing orb inside the cloud, and I tried to find a logical, rational explanation for it. And the explanation that I arrived at was that it was a reflected sunbeam on the cloud. And I was just about to leave again when something caught my eye, because right at the centre of the glowing orb inside the cloud, right at the centre, there was some grey cloud, dark grey cloud, swirling around very, very fast. And it was a phenomenon which I'd never seen before, and I watched it with interest. And again, I searched for a logical explanation, and I decided that the moving cloud was somehow to do with the heat energy from the sun, from the sunbeam, I suppose in a similar way to which paper will burn if you hold a magnifying glass over it and let the sun shine through it. So I was watching this phenomenon with interest, and again I was going to leave when suddenly there was a very small opening at the very centre of the swirling grey cloud, and one ray of what I can only describe as golden light shot out. It was a gold in colour, as opposed to the brightness of the sun. It was a definite golden, one single golden ray, a bit like a laser beam, really. And that then caught my absolute attention, because it suggested that the orb inside the cloud had its own light source, rather than it being a reflected sunbeam. So as I watched, I noticed to my astonishment that the very small opening turned into a small perfect square at the centre of the orb inside the cloud, and more of the golden light escaped from that perfect square. And I realised that I was looking now at a supernatural phenomenon, because no amount of physics between a sunbeam and a cloud can actually create a perfect square, as far as I am aware. And I also had to accept the possibility that I was actually just seeing things, and so I turned away from the cloud and looked down at Edward, at my son's friend and his mum, and then when I looked back, the square was still there, and actually it has got a little bit bigger. And as I watched the square, and I was expecting, I suppose at that point, I was expecting to see some form of alien spacecraft emerge through the opening. That is what I was reasonably expecting at that point. But instead, the square elongated into an upright rectangle, and from that rectangle, from the top, a head lifted up, and simultaneously an arm on either side of the rectangle, and I was suddenly face to face with a figure made entirely of light, of this golden light. And again, I forced myself to turn away, because apart from it being an absolutely real supernatural event, there was still the possibility that I was actually just seeing things, I was hallucinating. And I might add that I rarely drink, and I don't take drugs, and I wasn't on any kind of drugs or medications at the time of witnessing this. So I turned away and looked again at my son's friend and his mum sitting on the doorstep. I waved at them and tried to attract their attention, but instead they both stood up and went indoors. And before I looked back, I was telling myself, it won't be there when I look back, I'm sure it won't be there. And when I looked back, it was there. And so I suppose I don't know how long we stared at each other, because when I looked back, to my amazement, by that time the figure was really humanoid, and there was long wavy hair that fell over the shoulders, facial features, and folds in a long robe, all depicted in grey cloud. And it was just amazing, and so beautiful and incredible, and yet there it was, and I could not I had to accept that what I was witnessing was real. And then I was thinking, should I kneel? And then I became aware that the energy was still rushing through me, and suddenly my legs felt a bit weak, so I sat down on the chair that was at the desk near the bedroom window, and I just watched as the head went back down and the arms back to the rectangle, and the rectangle collapsed back to the square, and the square grew smaller until it was just a little pinhole again, and then the pinhole was covered up by the grey swirling cloud, and then the orb slowly faded from within the cloud, and then the whole cloud just dissipated. And then I went downstairs. I remember taking the dog for a walk. The feeling, the energy rush seemed to pass. And I suppose I can't even barely remember what happened the rest of that day. I think I was in a state of shock or astonishment. I don't remember feeling any fear at all. I felt actually delighted, and I tried to tell other people around me at the time. Well, I told them about my experience, and unfortunately received a very, very negative a very, very negative response from those people, most of them. Now, I think maybe they were scared, and it was just easier for them to suggest or try and find some fault with me. And, at the time I was studying history at Sheffield Polytechnic, and I not long after that experience passed all of my first year exams on that degree, and I certainly wasn't suffering any severe mental health problems. After that experience, things really did get very, very bad for me, and I suppose I was attacked by what people call the dark consciousness. I mean, I understand that the darkness is actually a benign entity, but because human beings with their real thoughts and the real circumstances and situations that they create with their real thoughts, that there are what they call dark energies, a dark consciousness, dark beliefs, which did attack me. And it was a very, very serious attack, and I was very vulnerable to it, obviously, because having such an experience, an undeniable personal experience, meant that I had no choice except to have absolute faith that there is a higher intelligence, a higher universal intelligence that can actually control light and clouds and, with an intelligent design, you see. So, obviously, that's a higher intelligence than me. It's a higher intelligence than any of the authorities that I am expected to submit to as a human being living in Britain on planet Earth at this moment in time. And so I could not ignore that higher authority as a higher authority, and I could not ignore its fact. And so at the same time, neither could I ignore the the counterfacts and the counter authorities that are operating directly through oppressing and ignoring the reality of the higher universal intelligence. And obviously with myself as a person that has for some reason been chosen to witness such a being, then I am personally a threat within the consciousness, the counter consciousness that is itself sustained by an absolute and complete denial of the supernatural and of the existence of a higher universal intelligence, except if that understanding is absorbed into a state approved sort of religion like Christianity or something, which is then controlled by those same authorities and which to all intents and purposes is in prison. And it was for that reason that I didn't immediately go to the church to become a so-called born-again Christian, or I didn't connect with any particular religion, though I did inform the church of my experience and other, not just the church, but other religious organisations. And, you know, I didn't really get much help from those people who tried to tell me that it was a personal experience and it was just meant for me. And it had nothing at all to do with my work and research in the weeks prior to me having that experience, and or to the fact that I'd recently chosen to become vegetarian, and so, it was basically like, well, you just go away with your personal experience. It has no bearing whatsoever on our religion, on our beliefs, even though experiences like yours are exactly what our whole religion is actually built on, And at the time, I did understand the message of universal law of abundance and compassion, though not exactly in those words. And now I realise that when the energy was flowing through me, it was actually telling me something. It was telling me something in vibrations. And I was already attuned to all of those vibrations. And it seemed that the counter energies that was telling me, no, that's all wrong. This is wrong. This is right. The world is right. Who are you and your little personal experience to question all of the world? And this is what the world says about you, And so basically, I was literally, I suppose, I was attacked spiritually with all the judgments that have ever been issued against women. Every single judgment against woman was thrown at me, and I was absolutely defenceless on one level, in terms of I could not dismiss the accusations. You see, I could not dismiss the accusations without being forced to look at the evidence that was presented to support those accusations. And even though I knew and felt that they were untrue and they were a twisting of the truth, at the same time, I had to accept that if one is to understand the truth, then you have to be very objective in that, and even at your own personal expense. And so if all of those allegations were true, and I am the most evil person on earth, and I'm the whore of Babylon, and I'm a witch, and I'm a Jezebel, and I'm an adulteress, and all these things that were accused against me, that then for the sake of that, then I should actually deny the light. That then shows bias, because it means that I'm just lying in order to cover up something. And so my natural conclusion from there, and especially with the very negative response and reaction of people around me, I decided, well, if all of those things are true, then the light being, it stands to reason the light being came to me only because I am such an evil person, and therefore, in a way, it has condemned me because I'm a threat to humanity and even my own child. And so I arrived at the point where I decided that the best thing to do was to end my own life, because if I was going to go to hell, I might as well go straight away instead of hanging around to cause more problems. And also, I was a risk even, therefore, to my own son. And so I decided that the best thing to do was to end my life. And I remember going to sleep and thinking, in the morning I'm going to get up and I'm going to find somewhere to end my life. And that night I had a dream of the Prophet Muhammad, and it was about 3 months after I'd witnessed the light being experience. And even though I'd been married to an Iranian, he wasn't a practicing Muslim, and I knew very little really about Islam, apart from what I'd seen of the Iranian government that took over after the revolution in Iran. And I'd witnessed terrible atrocities from that government, and I felt of what they were expressing of Islam was it was a horrible religion that persecuted and oppressed women. And so, for me to dream of the Prophet Muhammad, you would have thought, I would have been the last person really to have a dream of the Prophet Muhammad. And so, in my dream, I entered what I thought was a church, because I was with my son, and I was very, very concerned for his safety and well-being, for his psychological safety and well-being. And I was concerned because he seemed to be confused about which of the religions he believed in. As far as I'm aware, because in my dream, all I remember is entering what looked like a church and being greeted by these elderly men in long robes and pointy hats with a turban wrapped around their hats, and they had long beards. And my son immediately knelt on this small rug at the entrance and was saying, "Praise be to Allah, praise be to Jah, praise be to Buddha, praise be to Krishna." And and so I was saying to these people, these elderly men in my dream, I don't know what he is. I just don't know which of the religions that he's supposed to follow, or, and I remember feeling this anguish and concern and distress and I suppose pain. And the men didn't say anything to me, but they directed me to walk down a long aisle. And it was like a church aisle, but there were no pews. On my right side, all along this aisle, the women were sat, and they were wearing black and white headscarves. And to my left of the aisle, there were ascending steps with men, younger men, wearing white and pointy hats and turbans, and they all had dark beards, short dark beards, and they were standing in ascension with the top tier with their backs against the wall. And it was as if the way they were positioned, they were watching over the women, and so I carried on towards the end of the aisle, and I noticed that at the end of the church, instead of it being walls, it was actually a tent, and one of the flaps was open, and outside I could see blue sky and sunshine reflecting off desert sands. And at that far end was sat a very beautiful man with long brown hair and a dark trimmed beard, and he was wearing white, and he had two younger men standing above him, and some women sat to his right, a few women, and he was sat on some cushions. And I remember reaching the end of the aisle and kneeling down, and because he was on the floor, so I knelt down to speak to him, and I was talking to him. My hands were gesticulating, and I was expressing. I could feel the emotion, the anguish, the frustration, the pain, the concerns. I could feel all that inside me as I was gesticulating, but I do not know exactly what words I was saying, because it was like my consciousness was actually divided, and so what I was in connection only with my subconscious. My subconscious being was looking at this very beautiful man quite independently of my conscious being, and so I was only subconsciously aware, and I was looking at this man in amazement, because at first I thought that the glow around him was because of his white robe reflecting light, you see, off his skin. But as I'd got closer and was knelt down, I could see that the other men were wearing white, but it wasn't having the same effect on them, and actually the light was actually glowing out of his skin, and so that was just amazing to me. And so, as I say, my subconscious being was totally absorbed in this beautiful light sort of phenomenon that I was witnessing. And then as I was talking, the man arose and came towards me, and so I stood up then as well, and he handed me a black and white scarf. And as soon as he handed me that black and white scarf, I was suddenly back in my conscious mind. I was in connection with conscious me, and it was at that point that I realised that this man was Prophet Muhammad. And immediately I put the scarf on, and I was apologising profusely for entering a mosque without wearing a head covering, and he just put his hands, clasped his hands. He was absolutely delighted, and he gave me such a beautiful smile and such love and just acceptance I'd never experienced ever in my whole life before. Never. It was like the personification of the light being in person, that what that person couldn't show me as a light being, as a human being, I felt that from Prophet Muhammad. And so I woke up that next morning, and I remember going down to the kitchen, and just suddenly, like an echo of that dream, just appeared in my mind, like a picture of Prophet Muhammad with two women at either side, and the men, just this warmth, this love that just emanated from him. And it was such a beautiful experience, and also a shock, I suppose, because, well, like I say, I am not a Muslim, and I felt a very big, I suppose, what's the word? I suppose responsibility, which I already felt a responsibility of having experienced the light being, because there is a responsibility, because that experience underpins so many people's faith, that there is a responsibility once you experience something like that, and there's a responsibility to share it with other people, and also to make sure that you're not misguiding and misdirecting people by sharing that experience, because as a lot of the religions show, our human experiences can be twisted and, sort of manipulated into serving negative purposes, and then people blame God for that, when really it isn't God, it's just humans, criminal humans who want to behave lawlessly and who use whatever means they can to justify continuing their lawless behaviour. And so they do pick up on, the negative aspects of truth, I suppose, in order to make us believe in things that aren't actually true, or to have faith in things that aren't actually true. So from there, even though I felt this absolute love for Prophet Muhammad, I didn't know actually what to do, because, as I said, I had no allegiance to Islam in the form that it is being expressed by the Shiites and Sunnis in the world today. And at that time, I was a very weak individual. I had no confidence. I'd had to go for hypnotherapy just in order to be able to say my name, in order to go to university. I was at that point of that dream recovering from awakened memories of abuse that came not long after the light being experienced, and after people started saying I was mad, and using the fact that I'd been abused as a child to prove that I was mad. And it was the abuse that the dark energies used to attack me, because they were saying, you're an evil person and your father was evil, and that's why you were abused, because you was evil, and you're not here to serve anything good, you're just here to serve evil, and that kind of thing. And so that, and I felt, for me to say no, that isn't true, would have been non-objective, you see, and so I had to prove that it wasn't true, because it couldn't be just on my personal opinion. It had to be known, it had to be supported to be true by the universal intelligence. So anyway, I didn't feel confident going into a mosque, and I remember being out about in town in Sheffield, and I was at the Crucible Theatre, and somebody from my polytechnic, who I'd not seen for over a year, he was an acquaintance, so we used to help each other with essays now and again, suddenly called out to me, and I went over, and he seemed really wanted to talk to me, but I explained that I was just on my way to meet my mum, and so I gave him my phone number, and I told him that I would be in that evening if he wanted to ring. So later that evening he rang me, and I invited him over because he said he had something very important to tell me, and so he came around, and I asked him, made him drink, asked him what this important thing was, and he said, well, I think Allah wants me to help you to become to join Islam. And I was absolutely shocked. And he then went on to explain that he'd recently become a Muslim himself, and it was while praying in the early hours of the morning 2 weeks before, exactly the same night and time of my dream, that while praying I had suddenly appeared in front of him in his room as a kind of a vision. And I must say, I did feel a bit scared at that point. I did feel a bit scared, because I was, obviously, after a dream like that, and then to have this person that I'd not seen for over a year. He knew nothing about my experiences of light being or my dream, nothing at all about me. Just giving me this information, telling me that that he's had this vision of me, and he thinks that Allah wants me to become Muslim. So of course I told him about my dream. I told him about the light being experienced and about my dream, and as I described the men's headwear, he became really excited, and he said, "That's the Sufi headwear." And I was like, "Sufi?" And he explained to me Sufi Islam, and that he had become a Sufi Muslim, and that was the Sufi headwear. And he took me to the Sufi centre, and it was there that I met, I did learn about Prophet Muhammad. I read the books about him and learned more about his life, and I read the Quran, and I understood so many beautiful things from the Quran. And it was in sharing those things that I got led further. And you see, what it was is that Sufi Islam, this particular sect, had mixed zikrs, which is banned in Islam. Not in Islam, but in the so-called the Islamic division of their religion. But this Sufi centre included women and men together in the mixed zikrs, and they took place on a Thursday, which the zikr, it is prayers and singing to Allah, singing praises to Allah, and we share food, and it was a very beautiful, lovely experience, which unfortunately became increasingly infiltrated by what I would call extremist Muslims, who abided by what I understood as an antiquated interpretation of Islamic belief, which I did understand the Iranian authorities and Saudi Arabia live by, according to their interpretation of Islam. And so it was during some sort of debate and discussion that, and as I say, my dismay to see that a lot of the men were starting to question the mixed zikrs, and they were saying it was illegal, and there was arguments, and things were getting there was a lot of discord. And so I expressed my concerns about that and said, look, as far as I understand, the mixed zikrs are not against Islam. And I'm sorry if I'm just going to have to pause for a moment. Hi, sorry about the pause. And so I, on discussing my concerns, because as I say, I'd read in the Quran that Allah asks all Muslims to follow paths of knowledge and to respect all the peoples who follow paths of knowledge, or holy books or books of knowledge, and that we are asked to abandon old ways and traditions when new knowledge proves them wrong. And there's other things that I read in the Quran which I won't go into detail here, but I do understand fully that they support women having full and equal rights and autonomy in the 21st century, and they are absolutely, you know, they absolutely deny the right of people to live by usury, which is a form of slavery, and that includes banking usury or using anybody without, you know, without it being a proper employment that pays them a fair wage that they can feed themselves and their family on. So anything less than that, to use somebody in employment, is considered usury, and it is actually a form of slavery which is illegal, and universal law doesn't support it. And so in that sense, universal law does actually support Ubuntu, because Ubuntu lives by contributionism, and it's a much fairer approach, and it's a much safer approach for children, because in an economy that's built on usury, children especially are at risk because they become a commodity, because the money isn't actually supported by any true law. You know, it's not supported by universal law of abundance and compassion. It's supported by the proceeds of competition, and in competitions people can cheat, some people have a handicap, some will have advantages that, you know, make things very, very unfair. And so, you know, I understand, you know, that the Quran supports and Islam supports the light being and universal law of abundance and compassion. And so I was discussing this, and then somebody said to me, oh, my friend Ali, he says all those things. His organisation believes in all those things that you've just said. That is what they say as well. And so I was absolutely delighted to find that, oh, you know, it isn't just my strange understanding then, you know, that's because it obviously all the people don't believe it. Who am I, just one person, to question all these millions and millions of Muslim people, and I've only just become a Muslim, and yet here I am saying, well, you know, I don't think this is right. I mean, it seemed rude to me for me to say that, you know, and so I felt so much relief to find out that yes, there are Muslim people who believe that as well. And so so I left the Sufi Centre at that point, because, as I say, I was getting too distressed and embroiled in these horrible extremist arguments and disputes that were taking place there, and I felt it wasn't actually beneficial for me to be in that arena at that time. And so I met with the man Ali and found out that he was part of the ILF, the Iranian Liberation Front. And this was an organisation that explained to me that it was them that had won the revolution and had been active in, you know, demanding people's rights and standing up against the Shah through the Shah's regime. And Masoud Rajavi, who was a military officer or commander, it was he who had, you know, given the army's support to the actual revolution. And, you know, and for proof of that, I witnessed all their tanks and military planes and military equipment that they'd been forced to flee Iran with, and they were in exile along the Iraqi border, which Iraq had permitted them refuge there. And it was there that this so-called Iraq-Iran war took place. But actually, that was according to the world, what the world saw of it. But actually, it was the pro-Khomeini forces that were continuing to fight against the true revolutionaries, who were the Iranian Liberation Front. And you know, their revolution was usurped because the West gave a lot of publicity and attention to Ayatollah Khomeini, who was exiled in and living in France, and he was returned to Iran with a big, massive media attention, and he was surrounded by these armed revolutionary guards who were all dressed in black. You know, they did look a bit like ISIS, and they basically seized control of Iran. As far as I am aware of the evidence that's been shown to me, in like a rule of terror, you know, all kinds of terrible things were happening. And I think in the first 2 years, 250,000 people were executed. You know, that is a lot of people instantly executed. Others placed under house arrest, and the people basically just living in absolute fear, and the women especially, all of them just instantly denied their rights and required to dress from head to foot in, you know, just completely covered up. They weren't allowed to wear lipstick, you know, and there were all kinds of terrible things happening. And so, you know, the understanding was that the West had decided to back the Islamic extremists because they were more appropriate and conducive to Western needs than were the true revolutionaries, who basically were going to turn Iran into an Islamic socialist state, which would have been the first of its kind on earth, you know, because, you know, they weren't communist, they're still Muslim, but more on the Sufi side of Islam, because Sufism is about truth and integrity, and so they strive to reach the absolute core and truth of their belief and to build faith on what they actually know. And so, you know, they wouldn't have been able to denounce this new Islamic state as communist, because communism doesn't accept any kind of faith in any religion, does it? You know, so here we would have had it would have been basically a Sufi Islamic state. And at the moment there are no Sufi powers on earth. There's only the Sunni powers and the Shiite powers. There's no Sufi Islamic nation. And so I think it's very, very significant that Prophet Muhammad chose to present himself to me with the Sufis and to guide me to the Sufis, and that through the Sufis I've met Masood Rajvi and Mariam Rajvi and all their beautiful, dedicated people who strive to live by the true interpretation of Islam and according to 21st century knowledge, and they do respect women and children's rights, and they do not support usury, and their whole philosophy does actually support Ubuntu consciousness and Ubuntu contributionism, even though they didn't refer to it as that. And, you know, Michael Tellinger himself, he had a same idea, but he didn't call it Ubuntu. It was just that he found Ubuntu perfectly matched his idea, and it was the same with me. You know, I came upon an understanding of how we're meant to live, and you know, I called it rainbow consciousness. And then, you know, when I saw Michael Tellinger's work and learned about Ubuntu, then I realised that yes, it is actually the Ubuntu, and that's because universal law of abundance in compassion does, you know, that is what the way of life that it provides is an Ubuntu way of life, of contributionism, of fairness and balance. And that's what universal law supports. And the thing is that people can say, oh well, we don't want one world religion and one world government. And that's the beauty of universal law, because neither does it want any of those things. Universal law loves our human diversity and our different human cultures, because every land has its own culture, because every land has a different environment and has to live in different ways according to their environment and their climate. And so, of course, we're all different, and we have different cultures and different ways of faith. But the thing is that we can all submit to one law, you see, in the same way that every religion and every nationality, every faith can use money and can use this financial system, this present one, in exactly the same way. We can all equally use and submit to universal law and still keep all our faiths and our culture. But obviously some of our traditions we need to end, and especially those that deny people's human rights and that try to deny women's rights. These are not part of a religious belief. They are actually a tradition based on a false interpretation and understanding of the law, and unfair, giving certain parties unfair advantage over others, and also to the extent that they demote children as being minor human beings, which again, that is unacceptable, because according to universal law, every child is a VIP. So, so adults actually come second to children. That's how it is. And actually the only person that men are asked to kneel before are children. So, also we should not be kneeling before royalty or anybody, because, we're only asked to kneel before the children. And if in prayer we kneel on behalf of the children, for the sake of Allah, because Allah loves the children so much, and when we hurt children, it hurts Allah's heart, and Allah is very, very upset. Allah or Jehovah, Yahweh, is what names we've given to the universal consciousness, the universal intelligence that did actually create us. And we cannot deny the fact that it takes an intelligence to design and create a biological intelligence. And so, that is my foundation that I'm coming from, of how I've arrived at my knowledge, why I've arrived at my understanding, and why I focus on all the things I do in all of my videos, because I feel that people need to understand this and accept this as truth, because it is for our collective advantage. And unfortunately, the fact is that we cannot bring any positive change and be successful in bringing positive change if we don't understand the true and full nature of the problems that we're dealing with. Because if we don't understand the problem, then any attempts at trying to fix those problems could result in more damage, you see. So we have to understand exactly what the problems are, and I do identify them and outline them in my videos. And only because there are solutions to those problems. And when we understand the problem, then we can pick up on the solution. And that is my ultimate motive, I suppose, of making the videos in the first place. Because there would be no point, would there, in informing people about the horrible risks and dangers and things that are happening, if we've got no alternative to them, if there is no way out. So we can carry on along the Roman road of the New World Order with all its broad 5 lanes going in either direction, or we can actually turn the corner and, start living on planet Earth and start loving each other and caring for each other and not being afraid of death, because we know that death is not the end and we'll all probably be born again. As again, we have got proof of it. There are lots of people, and children especially, who come with memories of a past life, and we just can't deny these things. We can't deny these things anymore. And I think, as I say, with my experience that I witness of light being, then you can dismiss my testimony then, and in doing that you are dismissing all the people ever of the past who've experienced such things. You're dismissing Jesus, Muhammad, Buddha. You are dismissing the foundation of our very legal system that we live by today in terms of God's law, you see. Now, the God's law we're living by today has come from thousands of years ago, and the Quran has informed us, which is the most latest, apart from the things I'm saying now, the Quran is the most up to date, and even with the things I'm saying now, the Quran is ahead of me and up to date in terms of the real law we should be living by now, in terms of what we know, and that we can have faith in that. And I have spent 23 years, and I've lived as a normal, ordinary person. I've tried to stay real, and not to be, I haven't started any new religion. I don't go around, claiming myself to be like the new Messiah or anything like that, because I'm not. I'm none of those things. I am, as I say, an ordinary person that's had unusual experiences, and those experiences are what made me strong enough to deal with the higher experiences. So the fact that I survived very negative experiences throughout my childhood permitted my mind to be strong enough to deal with the higher, more positive experience. Says that, if other people, a lot of people, if they'd had such an experience, it could cause them, perhaps mental illness even. And so I think I was chosen for that particular purpose, and not because I'm a special person, I'm not especially good or a superhuman or anything like that. I am really ordinary, and I've got, I have got my faults as well. So, I certainly wouldn't put myself above any of the prophets, and, I don't see myself as bigger or better than anybody else anyway. And I certainly feel that the children, are definitely above myself and everybody. So, and I think that's the correct way to be, and it's the most loving way to be, and it is a nice, warm, friendly way to be, to care about people. And as I say, I know a lot in my videos I shout at people, I swear, I call them all kinds of names, the bad people, and I make no apologies about that, because those are a reflection of my true feelings, and the child within has had to suffer all of those abusive people and witness their terrible crimes. And even with that, I still have been very forgiving and tolerant towards people who've been very abusive towards me. And as I say, if people change, I don't, moan and shout at people, because I just want to let off a bit of steam, and I want to hurt them. It isn't because I want to hurt them, it's because they have hurt me, and I'm responding to the hurt that they've caused me. And I am expressing that hurt, and I do that because I hope that they will recognise my suffering and the suffering of others who are in the same position or even worse positions than me, and that because of that, in recognising that, they will change, you know. And I'm not a vindictive, vengeful person. I don't. Lots of people have done horrible things to me, and I've not done anything to hurt them back. And I have actually considered it once or tried, but it was so I just felt so futile. I actually felt ashamed that I just can't feel any pleasure, or I can't feel any, not pleasure, satisfaction of any sort of nastiness or sort of revenge, because I feel nothing actually is solved, apart from one nasty person's actions has now given me a reason or a freedom, if you want to put it, to be nasty. And that's not, that defeats the whole objective of freedom, doesn't it? Because we don't want to be free to be nasty to each other, do we? And we don't want to use the crimes that people commit in order to give us rights, therefore to be nasty, And so I don't believe in just punishments, nastiness. I believe that we have to understand that, yes, the so-called evil people, they are mentally ill, and yes, the dark consciousness, it's just lies, that's all it is, really, and it's what people believe of those lies, false beliefs. And that's why, when we have faith in what is true, in what we know, in what we reasonably suspect, in what we reasonably can say, yes, we believe that this is possible or this is probable, And so, as I say, I hope this explains something of what I've been through in the last 23 years, and, how I understand now. Even science supports my understanding of light being in terms of quantum energy, and they have built the Hadron Collider. They haven't done that because of a fantasy, have they? They've done that because quantum energy is actually real, you see, and we know that quantum energy is what created this whole universe, and it is part of this universe, and when it exists in human form, which it does, because there's no denying that every cell of our body contains quantum energy, and the thoughts in our head are powered by quantum energy, and that quantum energy does not die when we die. And so then we look at what the religions say happens to us when we die, and I think, well, yeah, there could be a quantum hard light paradise, because I've experienced it in my lucid dreams, where I've been dreaming, but I know I'm dreaming, but everything's real, but it's all been created by the thoughts in my head, which are quantum light energy. So if it can do that in my head, it can do it outside of my consciousness in another dimension. We have to accept these things as fact, because we're living in the 21st century, and that's where the knowledge has led us, and we can't deny it. The Hadron Collider, go and have a look at it. It's proof that it all exists, that it's real. It is no longer a question of just believing something. It's a question of what we know and what we intuitively have known throughout history. And so, it is it just a coincidence that all through our history, intuitively, as universal beings, we've known that we have an eternal light energy soul? And now science comes along and proves that actually, yes, we do. We do. Our bodies are full of this quantum light energy that leaves our body when we die. You know, we can't deny it. And this is where we've got to turn the corner. And it is only when we understand this that people will find the courage to let go of the worldly desires and worldly goods, you know, in terms of using everything that we have to benefit one another and all the life of our planet, because that is why we are here. We're here to protect Earth, to look after it, and to be happy. And the universe loves us. You know, it loves the life and experience it can experience on Earth. It's a rare, rare, rare oasis in a desert, you know. And yeah, there's other rare, rare oases of life throughout the universe, and it's a cause for celebration. It's a cause for celebration, not for children to be born, opening their eyes on this planet, to be told, oh, you're really poor, you're worthless, or oh, you're really rich, you're really valuable and important. You know, because we have to understand that we create the adults of tomorrow by what we put into the children's consciousness and life experience. And we can't keep feeding children these lies and imbalances and expect them to grow up balanced, good people, you know, because you can't live like that in a competition. And we're not meant to live in a competition. We're meant to live with compassion. Compassion. And Muslims know Allah, most merciful, most kind, most loving, you know. And there is one other thing as well, as far as Sharia law goes, because Sharia law was around a long time before Islam came along. And in fact, Judaic society was living by Sharia law in Jesus' time, as is proven from what is written about in the New Testament. And the only thing that Islam included into Sharia law was the capacity to forgive. That's what Islam included, that if victims of crime wanted to forgive somebody, they could. And that's what, and also to show mercy and understanding, and also to take everything into account. That's what Sharia law, that's what Islam included into Sharia law. So people who believe that we can carry on, continue to stone people to death and put them through horrible, terrible punishments today are wrong, because actually we have to live by 21st century knowledge that tells us that those kind of punishments are wrong, and they are not Allah's, they do not operate according to Allah's mercy, understanding and compassion. And as I say, that's not to say that we need to let criminals walk free, and just because somebody's decided to give a child abuser, that child abuser can then be allowed to be free. Because no, we can forgive as much as that person no longer remains a threat to themselves or ourselves or other people. We're not allowed to, we can still forgive a person, but that person's risk cannot be ignored on the strength of forgiveness if that person is suspected or known to still remain a risk and a threat to others, you know. And so that's where the law mostly works, is assessing the risk and threat to other people, and also to make sure that people have compensation paid. So so that's all I have to say. I'm sorry it's a really long video, and I hope that you will, when you watch my other videos, forgive me for my emotions and outbursts, and understand that those are a reflection of pain, and I am in pain, and that you will just accept that what I'm saying is just for your benefit, and I'm not in any way trying to profit personally or take advantage or mislead anybody, and that everything that I share is true and correct to the best of my knowledge, and that I share this information with integrity, and that Allah or Yahweh or Krishna, whatever name you give to the beautiful universe of intelligence, absolutely loves everybody, and the door is open for everybody to live by universal law of abundance in compassion, and that if we do choose that, then we will turn the corner into a new day and a new beautiful time on earth. And the message is wonderful, it's beautiful, it's amazing, and it's like finding out that the magic universe is real, and it is beautiful. And I really, really hope that people will find faith in that, and they will find faith in myself as a living being of what I have experienced, and that they will be guided to a much calmer, happier kind of life experience and existence, and that we will be strengthened by our understanding to get through the trials and tribulations of what we are going to face, and we do face today, in terms of those who would stand against us, and the difficulties, the problems that the confusion, the confused and criminal people have actually left for us to deal with, in terms of cleaning up the planet and making life safe. And it's likely these are going to take a long time, though I do believe that all the existing institutions and buildings that we have right now, we need to make do and mend, as it were, and use all these, fill them with new people and new agendas, new ideas that support a humanitarian way of life on earth, and celebrate our birth as conscious beings into universal consciousness, and that is where we are at. So I send everybody my love, and I wish you all the best, and thank you very, very much for taking the time to listen to this. Thank you.